8 years. That's how long Sarah and I have been together, and it feels like a lifetime and a blink at the same time. We have a beautiful little boy, Nathan. He's 5, the kind of kid who lights up any room he walks into. And honestly, I thought we had it all. I built up my own IT company from the ground up, took years of sleepless nights, tight budgets, and 100 risks. But it's finally paid off. We're comfortable. More than comfortable, really. Sarah and Nathan have everything they could ever need, and for a long time, I thought that was enough to keep us all happy. But here I am, staring at the empty space in our bed. My bed now, since Sarah and I agreed to take a break from each other. She's next door, in the apartment right across the hall. I'm trying to convince myself this separation is just a temporary arrangement, something we'll look back on and laugh about one day when we're old. But deep down, I'm starting to wonder if it's already the end. The trouble started so quietly, I barely noticed at first. Sarah began pulling away, small complaints about her boredom, her restlessness, the kind of stuff I brushed off as just a phase. She didn't have a job, never really needed one. I made sure she had every comfort she could dream of. A nice car, vacations, shopping sprees with her friends. I thought it was enough. Should have been enough, right? It wasn't. Her dissatisfaction grew louder, more insistent. What started as little comments about the lack of excitement in her life, how she was feeling stuck, turned into long silences, late nights spent with her phone glued to her hand, the glow of the screen painting her face in the dark. I'd ask her about it, but the answer was always the same. Just talking to friends, or it's nothing, Bruce. Stop overthinking. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting. Every time I tried to reach out, to figure out what was going on, she'd pull back. If I pressed too hard, she'd accuse me of being controlling, paranoid. We stopped having sex altogether, and she barely looked at me anymore. My mind started racing, and my patience thinned. I'm not the jealous type by nature. I've always trusted Sarah completely, but the distance between us was becoming impossible to ignore. I tried to be supportive, told her she could pick up a hobby or even a job if she wanted one. I offered to support any passion project she might want to take on. She'd just shake her head and mutter something about not knowing what she wanted anymore. I was lost, but the thought that maybe, just maybe, she was seeing someone else crossed my mind. So one night, against my better judgment, I looked through her phone. Nothing incriminating, anyway. But her reaction to my snooping threw me. She was livid, more upset than I'd ever seen her. She barely let me explain myself before slamming the bedroom door and locking me out. That night, I slept on the couch, staring at the ceiling and wondering what was happening to us. Our arguments only got worse after that. It felt like we were trapped in this vicious cycle. Me asking questions, her shutting me out, both of us growing more resentful by the day. I kept telling myself it was just a rough patch, that couples go through stuff like this, especially after years together. But deep down, I knew we'd crossed some invisible line. Then one evening, Sarah proposed that we should take some space from each other. She thought it would be good for us, a chance to clear our heads, figure out what we really wanted. She was unusually calm when she suggested it, as if she'd already made up her mind. And maybe she had. So, I agreed. We had 2 apartments on the same floor of our building. A perk of my work success, I guess, and Nathan would stay with each of us a week at a time, swapping back and forth. I hated the idea, but I didn't know what else to do. I was tired of fighting, exhausted from pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. And, honestly, a part of me was relieved. Relieved to not have to tiptoe around her moods anymore, to get away from the tense silence that had become our new normal. So now I'm here, in this sterile, empty apartment, alone with my thoughts. Half of Nathan's toys are still scattered around, like reminders of the life I thought I'd built for us, and I'm caught between anger and a hollow ache I can't shake. I want to blame Sarah. I want to tell myself that she's the one who's changed, that she's being unreasonable, that this isn't my fault. It's been 2 weeks since Sarah and I started this so-called break. I'd like to say I'm adjusting, that I'm getting used to this strange arrangement. But every morning when I wake up alone, it feels like I'm in some sort of twisted, prolonged nightmare. Nathan adapts to the new routine better than I do, bouncing back and forth between our apartments. I hate that this has become normal for him, but kids are resilient, right? At least, that's what I keep telling myself. I spend more time working than ever. My business has always been my escape, my sanctuary. Growing it took years of blood, sweat, and sacrifice. But now, every time I walk into the office, I feel a deeper pull to stay longer, just to avoid going home. The once simple act of coming back to an empty apartment, my son only there every other week, is like a reminder of my own failure. And despite my best efforts, I can't keep my mind from drifting to Sarah. I've replayed our arguments over and over in my head, trying to understand where things went wrong. Sure, she was restless. Sure, she seemed dissatisfied. But what I can't get past is this question. Why? What more could she possibly want? I provided for her, made sure she had a beautiful life, and was always there for her and Nathan. She didn't have to worry about bills or responsibilities. All she had to do was, well, be happy. Wasn't that enough? One night, after a long day at work, I find myself staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My face looks hollow, older, tired. I can still remember a time when Sarah would tell me how much she loved the life we built together, how grateful she was. Now, it's like I'm living with a stranger who sees me as little more than a roommate, someone who's just there to share custody of our son. Sarah and I still see each other in passing. We have to, of course, to swap Nathan back and forth. Those exchanges are brief, polite. She hands him off with a smile, asks how his week was, then leaves without a second glance. There's an awkwardness that hangs in the air, a tension we can't seem to break. It's like we've become actors in our own lives, playing our roles, waiting for someone to call cut, so we can stop pretending. But the problem is, no one ever does. One evening, after I've dropped Nathan off at her apartment, I decide I need answers. I'm tired of being in the dark, tired of wondering what she's thinking, why she seems so checked out. I knock on her door, and when she opens it, she looks surprised, as if I'm an unexpected guest. Sarah, I start, keeping my voice calm. We need to talk, she sighs, glancing back at Nathan, who's already running to his room to play. Bruce, can we not do this right now?
When?
I ask, a sharper edge to my voice than I intended. When is a good time, Sarah? Because I feel like I'm just supposed to go along with this, keep quiet, and wait for you to make up your mind. She crosses her arms, looking down at the floor. What do you want me to say, Bruce? I want you to tell me what's going on. You're acting like we're already divorced, like you're just done. My voice cracks on that last word, and I hate myself for it. She hesitates, her face softening for just a second before hardening again. I don't know, Bruce. Maybe I need more than this. She waves a hand around vaguely, as if to encompass everything in our lives, in our marriage. I feel like I don't know, drowning. I don't even know who I am anymore. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. She doesn't know who she is? After everything I've done to give her a perfect life, she's telling me that it's not enough because she doesn't know herself? Sarah, I say slowly, choosing my words carefully, if you don't know who you are, why am I being punished for that? Why is our marriage being torn apart because you're having an identity crisis? She looks away, biting her lip. I can tell she doesn't have an answer, or maybe she just doesn't want to give one. It feels like there's this wall between us, one she's built brick by brick, and I don't know if I'll ever break through. Maybe this break is what we need, she finally says. Maybe we just need time. Time for what? I ask, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. For you to figure out if you still want this? Bruce, please, she says, her voice tired, defeated. I don't want to fight anymore. Neither do I. But I also can't keep pretending everything's fine. I nod, swallowing down my anger and confusion, and turn to leave. As I close her door behind me, I realize that maybe she's already made her choice. As I walk back to my apartment, a hollow emptiness settles over me. I feel lost, like I'm drifting without an anchor. It's a strange feeling, and the worst part is, I don't even know how to fix it. It's been a few weeks since that last conversation with Sarah, and the emptiness hasn't left me. I keep pushing myself at work, hoping that the routine will help me forget this helplessness gnawing at me. But every night, I come back to a quiet, lifeless apartment, stripped of warmth and laughter. Even though Nathan spends half the week with me, the days he's gone stretch on forever. I'm trying to be the strong, steady dad he needs, but it's hard to give him the joy he deserves when I can barely find it in myself. I've been keeping to myself, too. Friends and colleagues have started asking questions, but it's too embarrassing to explain that my marriage is on the rocks, that I'm struggling to get through each day without being crushed by the weight of my thoughts. One evening, exhausted and alone, I find myself mindlessly scrolling through Instagram. I set up a second account recently, a normal one, without any luxury or business posts, just simple pictures of coffee cups, sunsets, and books, the kinds of things ordinary people post. I don't know why I did it, maybe because I wanted a break from the pressure of my successful persona. And that's when I see her profile. Linda. A quick glance at her page shows short clips of her dancing, her bright energy infectious, her smile warm. She's nothing like the polished, reserved women in my world. There's something about her rawness, her openness. It's like a breath of fresh air. Without thinking too much about it, I sent her a message. Just a simple, "Hey, saw your dance video. It's incredible." I'm not expecting a reply, not really. But a few minutes later, a notification pops up. "Thanks, stranger." I do my best, winky face. "What's your story?" I find myself smiling for the first time in what feels like ages. We start chatting, and I quickly realize how easy it is to talk to her. Linda doesn't care about appearances or wealth. She's open, free-spirited, the kind of person who lives in the moment and laughs loudly without a second thought. She asks me about my life, and for the first time in years, I feel comfortable being completely honest. Of course, I don't tell her everything. I'm still just Bruce, an average guy, not Bruce the businessman. But even that simple freedom is refreshing. Our conversations continue for a few days, and each one leaves me wanting more. Eventually, I can't help myself. I ask her out for coffee. I'm not sure if it's a good idea, but something inside me whispers that I need this. Something new. Something that might just remind me of who I am beyond my job and my complicated marriage. The day of the coffee date, I take a moment to get ready, even dressing down to avoid giving away my actual lifestyle. I swap my Tesla for an old Prius, slip on a basic watch, and try to appear as casual as possible. I even feel a bit nervous, which I haven't felt on a date in, well, maybe ever. When I arrive, I see her waiting by the cafe, scrolling on her phone. In person, she's even more captivating, her energy practically radiating off her. She's wearing a simple dress, her hair pulled back, her expression bright and welcoming. When she looks up and sees me, she waves with a big smile, and for a second, I forget all my troubles. The conversation flows effortlessly, and I feel lighter than I have in months. Linda tells me about her love of dance, about how she fell into teaching and performing because it made her feel free. She talks about her family, her dreams, her travels. I realize she's one of those people who makes every moment feel alive, even the simplest one. I find myself laughing at her stories, sharing small anecdotes about my life, the ordinary version, of course. She doesn't ask about work or money, doesn't care about what I can provide. It's just me, in this moment, sharing a coffee with a woman who seems to light up the entire room. After we finish, she suggests a walk, and we wander through the park nearby. At some point, she grabs my arm, pulling me into a playful spin as if we're dancing. I stumble, laughing, and for a brief, wonderful moment, I feel young and free again, as if none of my burdens exist. At the end of the date, she gives me a warm hug and looks up with a mischievous grin. "Same time next week?" "Absolutely," I say, without hesitation. Our third date stretches late into the night, neither of us wanting it to end. By the time we get back to my place, the air between us feels electric, charged with anticipation. Linda stands close, her gaze soft but intense, and without another thought, I lean in, capturing her lips in a kiss that quickly deepens, both of us letting go of any last reservations. We stumble our way to the bedroom, laughing softly as we navigate through the darkness, and every kiss, every touch feels like a revelation. Her skin is warm under my hands, soft and inviting, and as we draw closer, I can feel the pulse of her heartbeat matching mine. There's an urgency in the way we move, but it's not rushed. It's as if every moment, every caress is exactly as it should be. She wraps her arms around me, her hands exploring my back, my shoulders, pulling me closer. I've never felt so connected to someone, like she sees every part of me and accepts it. When we finally come together, it's with a tenderness that's both exhilarating and grounding. Every movement feels intentional, every breath shared between us. Time seems to blur, and all the stress, the weight of my marriage struggles, everything melts away. It's just the two of us, lost in this moment, letting ourselves be vulnerable, letting go of any barriers. Afterward, as we lie entangled in each other's arms, Linda's head resting on my chest, I realize how much I've needed this. A night free of complications, filled with warmth and connection. The quiet is comforting, broken only by our soft breaths, and for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be. It's then that Linda looks up at me, her expression full of sympathy. "Bruce," she whispers, "why don't we start over, together?" Her words echo in my mind, a proposition that feels dangerous yet so unbelievably tempting. In the soft light of dawn, I lie there with Linda resting against me, feeling a strange mixture of contentment and unease. Last night was something I haven't felt in years, an escape from the heavy, tangled web my life has become. But as reality slowly seeps back in, my thoughts return to Nathan, to Sarah, and to the mess my life has spiraled into. Linda's breathing is soft and even, and I can tell she's still asleep. A part of me wants to slip out, avoid confronting the complicated feelings building up in my chest. But another part of me, the part that's been starving for connection, wants to stay right here, to let myself fall deeper into this comfort she offers so easily. She stirs slightly, opening her eyes with a drowsy smile. "Hey," she whispers, her hand gently tracing circles on my chest. "You okay?" For a moment, I hesitate, but then I decide to tell her the truth. If I'm going to let her into my life, she deserves to know what she's getting herself into. "There's a lot I haven't told you," I begin, my voice barely above a whisper. I tell her about Nathan, about Sarah, about the divorce that seems to be looming closer every day. I tell her about the loneliness, the frustration, and how it feels like my marriage is slowly slipping through my fingers no matter how hard I try to hold on. Linda listens, her expression softening with understanding, and I can tell she's truly hearing me, not just waiting to speak. When I finish, she reaches out, brushing a hand along my jaw, her eyes filled with empathy. "I can't imagine how hard that must be," she says quietly. "You've been carrying this all on your own?" I nod, feeling the weight of my words as I finally voice the truth of what I've been hiding from everyone else, and maybe even myself. Linda's gaze holds mine, unwavering. "You deserve happiness, Bruce. Real happiness, not just going through the motions." Her words hit me like a jolt. Happiness. It's a simple concept, but one I realize I haven't actually thought about in a long time. I've been so focused on maintaining stability, on building a perfect life, that somewhere along the way I forgot to consider what I really needed. I wonder if that's why Sarah and I started drifting apart, because somewhere along the line, we both lost sight of what mattered. Linda places her hand over mine, squeezing it gently. "I know this is all complicated, and I don't want to add to that. But I like you, Bruce. A lot. And if you want, we can figure this out together." For the first time in months, maybe even years, I feel a flicker of hope. The idea of building something new, something unburdened by the expectations and disappointments of my marriage, feels like a lifeline. Linda offers me a way out, or maybe a way forward. But a nagging voice in the back of my mind reminds me that it's not that simple. There's Nathan to think about, and the impending divorce that's sure to be a battle. I can't let my son be caught in the middle of a messy situation. And the thought of Sarah, the way she looked at me that last time we spoke, with such distance in her eyes. It was like she was already halfway out of our lives. Later that day, I return to my empty apartment, and the silence is heavier than ever. I can't shake the feeling that this break from Sarah is no longer just a break. It's the beginning of the end. Every day we live apart, the gulf between us widens. We barely speak except to arrange Nathan's schedule, And even those exchanges are clipped and awkward. A few days later, I hear from my lawyer. Sarah has filed the initial paperwork for the divorce. The shock hits me harder than I expected, even though I'd been anticipating it. For all the distance that's grown between us, part of me still clung to the hope that we might be able to fix things. But with her official decision, it's as if any last shred of hope has been severed. I call Linda that evening, my mind racing with confusion and frustration. She listens patiently as I unload my worries, venting about the impending legal nightmare and Sarah's sudden decision. "Maybe this is a good thing," she says softly after I pause to catch my breath. "If she's already given up, then it might be time to let go, too." Sometimes the hardest part is just accepting it. It's hard to hear, but I know she's right. I've spent so long fighting to keep a hold on something that's been slipping through my fingers, and maybe it's time to finally let go. Linda's words offer a clarity that no one else has been able to give me. The choice is painful, but there's a certain peace in it too. Over the next few weeks, I lean on Linda more and more, and she becomes my anchor in the storm. We spend more time together, her lightness and warmth a comfort I've missed. We have our own routines now. Simple dinners, movie nights, laughing about things that seem small but feel big in the moment. And while the divorce proceedings march forward in the background, with every passing day, I feel a little less bound by my past. One evening, over a quiet dinner at her place, Linda looks up at me and says, "You don't have to do this alone. Whatever comes next, I'm here." And in that moment, as I look into her eyes, I realize that maybe, just maybe, I don't have to. For the first time in a long time, I'm starting to believe that there's life, and maybe even love, beyond the walls of the life I've been so afraid to leave behind. Sarah's demands are relentless, each one bolder than the last. I feel like she's systematically trying to strip me of everything I've built. My company, my savings, and the life I've worked so hard to create for Nathan. I'm drowning in frustration, a bitterness building inside me that I didn't even know I was capable of. And the most infuriating part? It feels like Sarah's doing this out of spite, out of some deep-seated resentment she can't put into words. Linda notices how worn out I've become, and one evening, she suggests something I hadn't even considered. "Bruce," she says, her voice careful, measured, as if she's testing the waters. "I've been thinking, maybe we should find a way to keep Sarah from getting everything. I know it sounds extreme, but," she pauses, looking at me intently, "what if you could show she's unstable? I mean, she's already been acting erratic, right?" I feel a flash of resistance, but Linda's words plant a seed. Could it actually work? Unstable? I repeat, trying to wrap my mind around it. "You mean like proving she's mentally unfit?" Linda nods, her gaze steady. "Think about it, Bruce. If she's seen as emotionally volatile or unbalanced, you might be able to keep her from taking control of your assets or demanding full custody. She's been acting strange enough lately. It wouldn't be hard to collect evidence." I hesitate. Using Sarah's behavior against her, deliberately trying to prove her unfit, feels cold, manipulative, even wrong. But then I think of all the ways she's hurt me, the nights I've stayed awake, consumed by anger and helplessness. The idea begins to take root. Maybe Linda's right. Maybe I need to fight fire with fire. "Okay," I say, barely recognizing my own voice. "But how would we even start?" Linda's face lights up with determination. "Simple. We document everything. You already know she's been unpredictable. Record those moments. Keep track of the messages she sends you, any erratic outbursts. And if you need to provoke her a little, just to get a clearer picture, well, that's not the worst thing." It sounds extreme, but as she speaks, the idea starts feeling less like a betrayal and more like a necessary step to protect what's mine and Nathan's. I don't want my son to grow up with his mother's bitterness influencing him. The next day, I start. I save every message Sarah sends, especially the late-night texts that switch between anger and regret. I record conversations, keeping a hidden microphone on me whenever I visit her to exchange Nathan. I begin to notice patterns, moments when Sarah's anger flares up and she lashes out without warning, even over minor things. Each outburst, each insult or irrational demand, adds to the growing pile of evidence, As the days pass, I feel like I'm drifting further and further from who I used to be. I've never been one for games or manipulation, but now I'm setting traps, pushing buttons, intentionally creating situations to catch Sarah in one of her emotional spirals. It's a dark, slippery path, and I feel myself slipping. Linda encourages me, saying it's for the best. You're protecting Nathan and your future, she assures me. You're doing what any good father would do. But there's a voice in the back of my mind, a faint whisper of doubt, an uneasy feeling that keeps gnawing at me. I know I'm taking this further than I ever wanted, but every time I question myself, the thought of losing everything to Sarah silences that doubt. One evening, after a particularly heated argument where Sarah accused me of abandoning her and Nathan, I return home exhausted, only to find Linda waiting for me. She listens as I replay the confrontation, her hand squeezing mine in quiet support. "Bruce," she says gently, "I think we're getting closer to what you need. Keep going. This will all be worth it." Her confidence is like fuel to my anger, and I find myself nodding, ignoring the guilt that's becoming harder to shake. I can't let up now. Sarah's already pushed me too far. A week later, Sarah shows up at my apartment, unannounced. She's disheveled, her eyes red from what I can only assume is a mixture of exhaustion and anger. "Bruce, what's going on?" she demands. "I feel like you're just setting me up, like I'm the bad guy. You're turning everyone against me, and I can't handle it anymore." For a moment, I'm tempted to soften, to tell her that maybe we're both victims of a marriage gone wrong. But the memory of her demands, her relentless need to take what's mine, hardens me. I look at her calmly and say, "Maybe you're just not handling this as well as you think, Sarah." She stares at me, and I can see the anger bubbling up again, her frustration raw and unchecked. It's another moment I can add to the list, another example of her unpredictability. After she leaves, slamming the door behind her, I feel a surge of satisfaction, and then, immediately, a wave of nausea. I glance at the recorded conversation on my phone, wondering just how far I'm willing to go. As I sit there in the quiet, I'm forced to confront a question I've been avoiding. What kind of father am I becoming if this is the path I'm choosing? And if Sarah does fall apart completely because of this, will I even recognize myself on the other side? Linda's words echo in my mind, a reminder that I'm doing this for Nathan, to protect him from a mother who might not be stable. But part of me can't shake the feeling that I'm losing myself in this game. And as the evidence piles up, so does the weight of my own guilt. The weeks blend together as I continue gathering evidence, my life becoming a routine of documentation and quiet manipulation. Every encounter with Sarah is now a test of patience, a chance to provoke her, to see if she'll snap. It's strange. There was a time when I would have done anything to protect her, to avoid hurting her. But now, as I push her buttons and watch her spiral, I barely recognize myself. Linda encourages me, even strategizes with me about the best ways to catch Sarah in a moment of instability. She's incredibly supportive, but sometimes her enthusiasm unsettles me. I see flashes of excitement in her eyes when we talk about the latest recordings or messages from Sarah. It's as if this game we're playing has given her a sense of purpose, a goal she's personally invested in. I try not to think too much about it. After all, she's just trying to help. But part of me wonders if I'm the one being played. One evening, I'm watching a video clip I recorded of Sarah from a few days prior. In it, she's shouting, her face twisted in anger, her voice shaking as she accuses me of tearing our family apart. It's perfect evidence, exactly what I need for the custody case. But as I watch her, I'm hit with an unexpected wave of sadness. I remember the woman she used to be, the bright, joyful person who once looked at me with love and pride. Now, she's a shadow of that person, consumed by anger and bitterness. And I can't ignore the fact that I'm partly responsible for that transformation. Nathan, oblivious to the tension between us, spends the weekends with me, and his laughter fills the apartment with a warmth that briefly eases the growing weight in my chest. One night, as I'm tucking him into bed, he looks up at me with his big, innocent eyes and asks, "Dad, why doesn't Mommy smile anymore?" The question hits me like a punch, and for a moment, I don't know how to respond. How do I explain to a 5-year-old that his parents are locked in a silent war? That I'm actively trying to push his mother over the edge to win a court case? I force a smile and pat his head. Mommy's just a little tired, buddy, I say, trying to sound reassuring. She'll be okay. Nathan nods, seemingly satisfied with the answer, and closes his eyes, drifting off to sleep. But the guilt lingers, gnawing at me, making it harder to ignore the consequences of my actions. That weekend, Linda and I go out to dinner to celebrate our progress. She's thrilled by how much evidence I've gathered, her voice full of excitement as she discusses the next steps in our plan. But I can barely focus on her words, the memory of Nathan's question playing on repeat in my mind. You okay, Bruce? Linda asks, noticing my silence. Yeah, I say, forcing a smile. Just a lot on my mind. She squeezes my hand, her eyes sparkling. Just think about the endgame. Once Sarah's out of the picture, it'll be you, me, and Nathan, living the life you deserve. Her words sound sweet, tempting, but there's something off about the way she says it. I can't shake the feeling that Linda is more interested in winning than in what's actually best for Nathan. I push the thought away, convincing myself that I'm overthinking it. But the doubt continues to simmer. A few days later, Sarah calls me out of the blue, her voice shaky. Bruce, can we talk? Just talk. No fighting, no accusations. Please. I hesitate. Part of me wants to ignore her, to stick to the plan. But another part of me, the part that remembers the good times, the woman I once loved, can't deny her request. We meet at a quiet park nearby. She looks different, worn down, almost fragile. She doesn't have the angry fire I've gotten used to seeing in her. Instead, she seems vulnerable. It throws me off balance. Bruce, she begins, looking down at her hands. I know things have gotten bad between us, and I know I'm partly to blame. But I don't know how we got here. I feel like I'm losing myself, like I don't even know who I am anymore. Her words tug at something deep inside me. I realize that for all the anger, all the resentment, Sarah's as lost as I am, maybe even more so. And the realization stirs up memories of our early years together, back when we were just two people in love, building a life from scratch. I don't know who you are anymore either, Sarah, I say, my voice barely above a whisper. But maybe that's on both of us. She nods, wiping a tear from her cheek. For the first time in a long time, there's no anger in her eyes, just sadness, resignation. We sit in silence for a while, each lost in our own thoughts. And in that quiet, I feel a flicker of something I thought was long gone. Compassion. For all the hurt and betrayal, Sarah is still Nathan's mother, still the person who once made me happier than I ever thought possible. And now, as I watch her struggle to hold herself together, I wonder if I'm doing the right thing by tearing her down further. When we part, I feel heavier than before. The doubt that's been gnawing at me has grown stronger, harder to ignore. I start questioning the plan with Linda, wondering if I'm about to cross a line I'll never be able to uncross. That night, as I sit alone in my apartment, the evidence I've gathered feels like a pile of stones on my conscience. And for the first time, I start to wonder if winning this battle is worth what I'm losing in the process. The next morning, I call Linda, ready to tell her that I need a break, that I'm not sure I can go through with the plan. But the words catch in my throat as soon as she picks up, her voice full of excitement, oblivious to the turmoil I'm feeling. Bruce, I have an idea that's going to seal this for us completely, she says. Are you ready to take this to the finish line? I hesitate, feeling the weight of her words. And as I stand there, phone in hand, I realize I have a decision to make. One that could change everything. Linda's enthusiasm on the other end of the line feels like a slap. Here I am, wrestling with my conscience, while she's charging ahead, focused on winning, as if this were some kind of twisted game. The pause on the phone drags on too long, and I hear her tone shift slightly, sensing my hesitation. Bruce, she says, a hint of impatience creeping into her voice. Are you still with me? I swallow hard, trying to find the right words. Linda, I'm not sure I can go through with this. I mean, she's still Nathan's mom. Do we really need to go this far? A heavy silence fills the line, and I can almost hear the shift in Linda's demeanor. She's silent for a moment, and when she speaks again, her voice is sharp. I thought you wanted to protect your son and your future. This isn't about Sarah. It's about ensuring you don't lose what's yours, what you've worked for. Are you seriously going to back down now? Her words hit me, stirring up the same anger and frustration that fueled this whole plan in the first place. But I can't shake the image of Sarah at the park, her tearful confession of feeling lost, her vulnerability as she admitted she didn't recognize herself anymore. It's haunting me, forcing me to question what I've become. I don't know if this is right anymore, I say, my voice shaky. Linda sighs, clearly frustrated. Look, Bruce, if you want to play the saint, go ahead. But don't forget what's at stake here. She's already trying to take you for everything you have. If you don't act now, you'll be the one who's left with nothing. Her words sit like stones in my gut, but I can't shake the feeling that something's changed. Somewhere along the line, this plan stopped being about protecting Nathan and my assets and became something darker, something that feels more about revenge and control than about justice. Linda, I need to think this over, I say quietly, hanging up before she can argue further. For the next few days, I avoid Linda's calls and texts. She grows impatient, sending me increasingly pointed messages, urging me to stay focused, to follow through. But the more she pushes, the more I feel myself pulling away. The intensity of her desire to ruin Sarah feels like a warning sign I can no longer ignore. Meanwhile, the custody negotiations with Sarah's lawyer drag on. My attorney tells me that, without any evidence of Sarah's unfitness, it's likely she'll get a substantial settlement and shared custody. That means losing some of the assets I've built up, possibly even having to sell a stake in my business. The idea stings, but every time I consider using the evidence Linda and I gathered, something holds me back. A nagging doubt, a sense that if I do this, there's no turning back. Finally, one evening, Sarah calls me out of the blue. Bruce, she says, her voice softer than I've heard in a long time. Can we meet? Just you and me. I think we need to talk, away from the lawyers, away from all this mess. I agree, though I'm not sure what to expect. We meet at a small cafe downtown, one we used to visit when we first started dating, and for a moment, a sense of nostalgia washes over me. We were so different back then, full of hope and ambition, completely in sync with each other. When I walk in, Sarah is already seated, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, her gaze distant. She looks up as I approach, her expression tired but sincere. Thanks for coming, she says quietly. I nod, unsure where to start. She takes a breath, visibly gathering her thoughts before she speaks. Bruce, I know things have gotten out of control. I never wanted it to be like this. She pauses, then continues. I know you think I'm just after your money, but it's not about that. I want what's fair. And I don't want Nathan to feel like his family is completely shattered. Her words hit me in a place I didn't expect. For all the hurt, all the resentment, there's a strange honesty in her voice that I haven't heard in a long time. I never wanted this either, Sarah, I say, my voice low. But everything just spiraled. We both got caught up in the worst parts of ourselves. She nods, her expression softening. Maybe we're both guilty of that. We sit there in silence for a while, letting the weight of our words settle between us. And for the first time, I feel a sense of understanding, a mutual acknowledgement that our problems were never as simple as one of us being right or wrong. After a few minutes, she speaks again, her tone tentative. Maybe we can work something out. For Nathan's sake. I don't want him growing up with parents who hate each other. The idea feels like a lifeline, a way to break free from the toxic cycle we've been trapped in. I nod slowly, feeling something release inside me. I want that too, Sarah. We spend the next hour talking, more openly than we have in years. We lay down terms that feel fair, compromises that don't leave either of us completely destroyed. By the end of it, I feel a strange sense of peace, a hope that we can salvage something from this wreckage. Not our marriage, but a future where we can both be there for Nathan without tearing each other apart. Afterward, as I walk back to my apartment, I realize I haven't felt this light in months. I scroll through my messages, finding a string of unread texts from Linda, each one more insistent than the last. But as I stare at her words, the anger, the manipulation, I feel nothing but a sense of finality. Linda's support got me through some dark times, but now I see the cost. She's pushed me to the edge, encouraging a bitterness that's been eating me alive. And in that moment, I know what I need to do. With a steady hand, I type out a response to Linda, keeping it short and simple. Thanks for everything, but I need to do this my way. I'm out. Then, before I can second-guess myself, I hit send and block her number. Standing alone in the quiet of my apartment, I feel a sense of release, a line finally drawn. The path ahead won't be easy, but at least it will be mine. One built on honesty, for myself, for Sarah, and most of all, for Nathan. The day we signed the final papers was surprisingly quiet. There was no big showdown, no harsh words, just a quiet understanding that, at the end of everything, we had come to a place of peace. As I watched Sarah sign her name on the last document, I felt something I hadn't expected, relief. It was as if a weight had lifted, freeing both of us from the anger, the resentment, and the endless cycles of blame. We walked out of the lawyer's office together, exchanging a brief look that held years of history, shared memories, and quiet forgiveness. I didn't feel the bitterness I'd anticipated. Instead, there was a strange gratitude. Gratitude that we'd found a way to let go, and that we could start fresh, for ourselves and, more importantly, for Nathan. We both knew our marriage was over, but we also knew that didn't mean we couldn't still be partners in a different way. As co-parents, we had the responsibility to create a stable, supportive environment for our son. We agreed to set aside our personal conflicts and focus on Nathan, who deserved parents who could at least get along. In that moment, I knew I'd made the right decision in letting go of the bitter game Linda had pushed me toward. Linda. Even her name now left a strange aftertaste. I hadn't heard from her since the day I told her I was out. She didn't reply, didn't call, didn't show up. In her silence, I saw the truth. She was never really there for me. She was there for the thrill, for the challenge, for the role she could play in a situation already messy and broken. I realized she represented a part of me I needed to leave behind, the part that sought escape from pain and revenge and manipulation. Letting her go, too, felt like shedding another weight, one I'd been carrying without realizing. With that chapter closed, I turned to the life I still had and the people who mattered most. For the first time in years, I made an effort to truly be present for Nathan. We spent more time together than ever, going to the park, having movie nights, and just talking. I learned things about him I hadn't noticed before, like how much he loved drawing and telling stories. Seeing his excitement as he shared his creations reminded me of what I almost lost while I was too focused on revenge. Sarah and I began working together in small but meaningful ways. We shared updates on Nathan's week, discussed his school progress, and even started attending some of his school events together. It wasn't easy, especially at first. The old habits of irritation and resentment were hard to shake. But the more we practiced, the more I realized we were both growing, in our own ways, beyond what we had been as husband and wife. We were learning to be friends, or at least friendly, for the sake of our son. And that alone felt like progress. Months passed, and I noticed changes in myself that I hadn't anticipated. I stopped measuring my life by material success and instead began to prioritize the peace I'd found in being present, honest, and intentional. I worked fewer hours, delegated more tasks to my team, and made a point to connect with friends and family I'd neglected during the chaos. Life felt simpler, lighter. One evening, as I was dropping Nathan off at Sarah's apartment, she invited me in for a cup of coffee. We sat in her kitchen, talking casually about Nathan's latest antics, and it was as if all the hurt, the anger, and the disappointment had finally dissolved. We were just two people with a shared goal, two parents laughing together over our son's silliness. As I left her place that night, I felt a sense of closure. The life we had once shared was over, but something new had emerged from the ashes, a partnership built on respect and understanding. Not long after, I did meet someone new. Unlike with Linda, there were no games, no need for hidden motives. This time, I took things slowly, allowing myself to feel without rushing, without any of the frantic energy that once defined my relationships. It felt right, in a way that was calm, steady, and solid. I realized then that sometimes the hardest part isn't moving on. It's forgiving ourselves for the mistakes we made along the way. I forgave myself for the anger, the bitterness, the desperation that had driven me into the darkest parts of myself. And in doing so, I freed myself to truly begin again. The past was still there, a part of me, but it no longer defined me. Now, my focus was on the future, on my son, on building healthy relationships, and on the quiet satisfaction of knowing that, finally, I was at peace.